entitled Brother Steals My Room, so I took their security. The silence was deafening, hanging in the air like a thick fog before a storm. Years of simmering resentment, of being overlooked and undervalued, were about to reach a boiling point. You see, I'd been paying rent to my parents for years, dutifully contributing to the household, while my golden child brother coasted through life. Then, one phone call ripped the fragile fabric of my patience apart, leading me to execute a plan so audacious, so satisfyingly underhanded, that I still get a thrill thinking about it. Paid rent for years. From my earliest memories, growing up I always knew I was the second choice. My name is Emma, and from my earliest memories, the difference in how they treated us wasn't subtle, it was as clear as day. I remember sitting at our kitchen table, watching my older brother, Michael, bask in the glow of my parents' unwavering adoration. He was 3 years older than me, and somehow that made him more deserving of everything. My parents jumped at the chance to nurture it. Michael has such a beautiful voice, Mom would gush to anyone who would listen. He's going to be something special one day. Meanwhile, I learned early on not to ask for much. When I showed interest in art class, the response was always the same. Maybe next semester. Michael's voice lessons are taking up the budget right now. The disparity became even more apparent during Michael's senior year of high school. I was 15 at the time. We've been saving up. It's one of the most prestigious schools in the state, they declared, their voices brimming with excitement. Really? Michael asked, a smug grin spreading across his face. And that's not all, Mom continued. You can stay at our apartment near the campus, of course. We want you to focus on your studies. I pushed my peas around my plate, trying to hide my disappointment. Not that anyone was looking at me anyway. They were all focused on Michael's beaming face as he talked about his future plans. If they were spending this much on Michael's education and giving him a free apartment, the realization hit me hard. I was on my own. The next day, I visited my grandparents' antique store. My grandfather listened intently as I explained my situation. Well, Emma, he said thoughtfully, pausing for a moment. We could give you the money you need, but I think it would be better if you earned it yourself. How would you like to work here after school? So that's how it started. I began working at the antique store every afternoon after school. I'd help catalog items, carefully dusting each artifact. My grandmother would bring me snacks and tell me stories about the vintage pieces we sold, her eyes twinkling with each word. My parents' reaction to my initiative was telling. When I told them about my job and my plans to save for college, they barely acknowledged it, their attention always elsewhere. When I graduated high school, there wasn't much fanfare, just a quiet dinner at home. But I didn't mind. I enrolled in the local state college. The tuition was reasonable, and I even had some money left over. Living at home and taking the bus to campus wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Mom, I've been thinking about getting a used car, I mentioned one day, hoping for some support. Dad barely looked up from his phone. Sorry, Emma, we just don't have the money for that right now. Lots of students use the bus. I bit my tongue, the familiar sting of disappointment welling up inside me. But that was ancient history now, a distant memory compared to the storm that was brewing. My first year of college passed quickly. Then came the day of Michael's wedding. Our house was packed with relatives. I was arranging appetizers in the kitchen when Michael made his grand entrance with a pretty blonde woman on his arm. Sarah, his college girlfriend. They were beaming as they walked into the room, hand in hand. Sarah and I have some exciting news, Michael announced dramatically, pausing for effect. We're engaged. The room exploded with cheers and congratulations. Mom burst into tears of joy, overwhelmed with emotion. And there's more, Michael continued, reveling in the attention. After the wedding, we're moving to Connecticut. My parents own a successful business there, and they want us to take it over. Mom swooned, her eyes glazed with pride. My baby boy, a successful businessman, I always knew you were destined for great things. I stood in the corner, watching the scene unfold. Nobody seemed to notice that I just finished my freshman year with a 4.0 GPA or that I've been working part-time at a local cafe while maintaining my studies. But I was used to it by now. The wedding preparations consumed the next year. While I focused on my studies, they poured all their energy into planning the extravagant affair. They took out a substantial loan to cover everything. The venue, the catering, the flowers. The wedding itself was exactly what you'd expect. Extravagant, emotional, and centered entirely on Michael. I stood in my bridesmaid dress, which I had to pay for myself, feeling like an extra in my own family's story. Afterwards, when the newlyweds announced their plans to move into the apartment near Michael's new job, something snapped inside me. I needed space, some breathing room, and it would give me some much-needed independence. I approached my parents that evening while they were watching TV. Mom, Dad, would it be okay if I moved in there? They exchanged glances before Mom spoke. Well, honey, you can move in, but you'll need to pay rent. The words hit me like a slap in the face. But Michael lived there for free, I protested, my voice laced with disbelief. That was different, Dad said dismissively. We have the wedding loan to pay off now. We need the extra income. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'm your daughter too, I said, my voice trembling slightly. I've never asked you for anything. I work for my college money. She and Dad had one of their silent conversations, their eyes communicating volumes without a single word being spoken. To spend money on another of Michael's activities. Fine, Mom finally said, her tone begrudging. We'll charge you half the normal rent. I wanted to argue more, but I knew this was the best offer I'd get. Okay, I'll take it. That weekend, I moved into the apartment. I took extra shifts at the cafe to cover the rent, often working until closing time. Between classes, my job, and the commute, I barely had time to sleep. My final year of college passed in a blur of textbooks and coffee shop aprons. Before I knew it, graduation day arrived. While my classmates' families planned parties and celebrations, mine barely acknowledged my accomplishment. They only invited my grandparents, no extended family, no friends. We sat around the dining room table, eating the lasagna I made myself. Grandma reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Emma dear, we are so proud of you. Graduating with highest honors while working part-time is an incredible achievement. My parents barely looked up from their phones. Then, Mom's face lit up as she read a message. Speaking of achievements, she exclaimed, Michael just texted. The business is doing wonderfully. He says they're expanding into 2 new locations. I watched as my graduation dinner turned into a celebration of Michael's success in Connecticut. My grandparents exchanged knowing looks, and Grandpa squeezed my shoulder supportively. My hard work in college paid off sooner than I expected. Within 2 weeks of graduation, I received a job offer from one of the most prestigious firms in the city. I was ecstatic. That excitement lasted exactly 3 days until my parents found out about my salary. Emma, Mom said during one of her unexpected visits to the apartment, now that you're making good money, you should start paying the full rent amount. I stared at her, wondering if I heard correctly. But we agreed on half, I protested. That was when you were a student. You can afford it now. I wanted to point out that Michael had lived here for free even after getting a job, but I'd learned that comparing myself to my brother was pointless. Life fell into a routine. I threw myself into my work, determined to prove my worth at the company. Every month, like clockwork, I received a reminder from my mother. Emma dear, just reminding you about the rent. It's due on Friday. We're counting on that money. I learned my lesson. Any hint of financial success would just lead to more demands from my parents. Through their occasional updates, I knew that Michael and Sarah were doing well in Connecticut. I'd seen pictures on social media but hadn't visited. Our communication had dwindled to perfunctory birthday messages and holiday greetings. I was fine with that. Then came the phone call that changed everything. Emma, Mom's voice was tight with tension. We need to talk about your brother. There's been some trouble. My stomach clenched. The business it hasn't been doing well. I closed my eyes, already knowing where this was heading. He had a terrible fight with Sarah's parents. They're not speaking anymore. I closed my eyes, already knowing where this was heading. He's coming back home. With Sarah and the baby. Oh, I said carefully, trying to keep my voice even. I assume he'll be staying with you and Dad. Actually, Mom said, hesitating slightly, that apartment you're in is quite large. He'll be staying there. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. Mom, this is my home. I've been living here for years, I exclaimed, my voice rising in disbelief. Don't be dramatic, Emma, Mom snapped. Your brother needs help. He doesn't have any money right now, so he'll stay there for free. You can keep paying the rent. A wave of anger washed over me. If he's moving in, maybe I should just find my own place. Don't you dare, Mom's voice turned sharp. We need your rent money now more than ever. Michael's going through a rough time. You wouldn't want to make things harder for him, would you? I shook my head in disbelief and hung up without another word. The moving day was worse than I'd imagined. Michael, Sarah, and their baby arrived, along with a mountain of luggage. Mom arrived to supervise the transition. Emma, clear out your room, Mom directed, hands on her hips. Michael and Sarah needed for Tommy's nursery. I stood in the doorway of my bedroom, my personal space for the past 4 years, feeling a surge of protectiveness. What? Where am I supposed to sleep? I asked, my voice trembling with anger. The living room has a perfectly good couch. You can't be serious, I exclaimed, my voice rising in disbelief. I pay rent here, I pay rent, and you're putting me on the couch. Mom's expression hardened. Don't be selfish, Emma. Your brother has a baby. So I watched helplessly as my bedroom was transformed into a nursery, complete with a crib, changing table, and all the other baby paraphernalia. My belongings were unceremoniously piled in a corner of the living room. The next few weeks were a nightmare. Michael alternated between complaining about his in-laws and reminiscing about his glory days as a successful businessman. I'd come home from a long day at work to find dishes piled in the sink and toys scattered everywhere. The first few times, I cleaned, I cooked, trying to maintain some semblance of order in my own home. and every meal I prepared mysteriously disappeared before I could eat it. One evening, after a particularly frustrating day at work, I decided to extend an olive branch. "Michael," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral, "I could put in a good word for you with HR. There are several openings right now. The benefits are great." His face twisted with indignation. "An entry-level position. Are you kidding me? I'm a businessman. I don't do entry-level jobs. I need an executive position." The words slipped out before I could stop them. "With your experience running a business into the ground, I'm sure that won't be a problem." Michael's face turned red. "You don't know anything about what happened. That was my in-laws' fault. They set me up to fail." He stormed off to his room, my old room, leaving me standing there, wondering how much longer I could live like this. The numbers didn't lie. My expenses had nearly doubled since Michael and his family moved in. I was drowning in debt and exhaustion. That was the final push I needed. I called my parents, rehearsing what I would say, determined to remain calm and rational. The phone conversation went about as well as expected. "Mom, Dad, we need to talk about the living situation," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "Michael and Sarah aren't contributing anything to the household expenses. They're eating all my food, using utilities I pay for." "Emma," Mom cut me off, her voice rising in exasperation. "I can't believe how selfish you're being. His in-laws betrayed him, and now he has a baby to take care of." Dad's voice joined in from the background. "You should be grateful you're in a position to help your family." "But that's just it, Dad. I'm not just helping. I'm carrying the entire financial burden." "Enough," Mom snapped. "Your brother is going through a difficult time. This isn't forever. You need to be more understanding." That night, I opened my laptop and started searching for apartments. I bookmarked several promising options, all within walking distance of my office. Just in case, I told myself, just in case things get worse. Things got worse exactly 2 weeks later. I was sitting on my couch bed, trying to focus on work documents while Tommy wailed in the background and Michael and Sarah had their fourth argument of the day. The doorbell rang, and my parents walked in without waiting for anyone to answer. Mom had that look on her face, the one that meant trouble. "Emma, we need to discuss the rent." My heart sank. "I paid this month's rent on time, as always," I said, my voice tight with apprehension. "Yes, but starting next month, we're going to have to increase it." The room fell silent. I stared at my mother, speechless. "But I'm already paying the full market rate," I exclaimed, my voice laced with disbelief. Mom gestured around the apartment, her eyes taking in the chaos and clutter. "More wear and tear on the property, more utilities are being used. It's only fair that the rent reflects that." I couldn't help but laugh, a hollow, bitter sound. How is it fair that I should pay double rent for being forced to sleep on a couch in my own living room? If anyone should pay more, it should be Michael. He's the one who Mom cut me off, her voice sharp. "Michael lost everything, and now you want him to pay rent." "Of course not, sweetie. Emma, you have a good job. You can afford this. Your brother needs time to get back on his feet." Her tone was firm, her expectation clear. Michael watched the scene unfold, his face a mixture of entitlement and indignation. Sarah just looked smug, a flicker of satisfaction in her eyes. But I swallowed it down, forcing myself to remain calm. "Fine," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. "Double rent, starting next month." Mom's face broke into a satisfied smile. She and Dad left shortly after, their mission accomplished. They had no idea they'd just given me the push I needed to finally make my decision. Later that evening, while trying to read a book on my uncomfortable couch bed, I overheard Michael and Sarah talking in the kitchen. "Can you believe it?" Sarah giggled, her voice dripping with amusement. "Your mom just told me they're going to give us half of Emma's rent money every month." Michael chuckled. "Of course they are. Emma makes plenty of money. Plus, she can support us for a while." Sarah added, "This is perfect. We get to live here for free, and we'll even have spending money." "Your sister doesn't need to know," Michael said. I lay there, my knuckles turning white, my blood boiling with rage. All this time, I thought my parents were just being unfair. They weren't just enabling Michael, they were actively planning to use me to fund his laziness. I grabbed my laptop and pulled up the apartment listings I bookmarked. One caught my eye, a modern one-bedroom in a quiet building. The rent was exactly what I'd been paying before the proposed increase. I called the number immediately, trying to keep my voice down. "Hi, I'm interested in the apartment on Cedar Street. Is it still available?" The landlord confirmed it was. "Yes, I could come see it right now if that's possible." "Perfect, I'll be there in 15 minutes. The apartment was everything I hoped for, clean, modern, and blissfully quiet. I signed the lease then and there. Back at the apartment, I waited until everyone was asleep before quietly packing my essential belongings into 2 large suitcases. I left my furniture, it wasn't worth the hassle. The next morning, I wheeled my suitcases to the door, while Michael sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through job listings he had no intention of applying to. He didn't even look up as I passed by. Going somewhere, he grunted, his voice laced with suspicion. Month-long business trip, I replied casually, big project in our Cincinnati office. He just grunted again, already uninterested. I moved into my new apartment that evening, ordering takeout and sitting on the floor of my empty living room. The silence was beautiful, a welcome change from the constant noise and chaos of the old apartment. Just peace. For the next month, I lived quietly in my new home. I bought a comfortable bed, the kind I'd always dreamed of having. I cooked meals that stayed in my refrigerator until I ate them. I slept through the night without being awakened by Tommy's crying. Then, right on schedule, my phone rang. It was my mother's number. She snapped without preamble. Why haven't you sent the full rent payment? We agreed on double, remember? I couldn't help but laugh, a triumphant sound that echoed through my empty apartment. Actually, Mom, I know all about your little arrangement with Michael and Sarah. Were you planning to tell me that half my rent money was going straight into their pockets? There was a long, pregnant pause on the other end of the line. That's none of your business. Your brother, I interrupted her, still chuckling. What my brother needs is to grow up and take responsibility for once in his life. I've moved out, found my own place. The apartment is all yours and Michael's now. The silence that followed was deafening. The reliable source of income was gone. You what? You can't do this. We need that rent money, Mom shrieked. Well, I'm sure Michael will step up and start paying rent now that he's had time to get back on his feet, I said sarcastically. I can't wait to see how that works out for you. There was a moment of silence on the phone after my declaration. Emma, sweetie, Mom's voice suddenly turned sugary sweet, a tone I hadn't heard in years. Let's not be hasty. We can work something out. What if we go back to the original rent amount? That was fair, right? I settled deeper into my new couch, savoring the feeling of being in my own space. Mom, that's not going to happen, I said firmly. She tried one last plea. Emma, we're family. You can't just do this to us. When everything is said, we're family. Family, is that what you call it when you scheme behind my back to funnel my money to Michael? When you kick me out of my own bedroom while I'm paying all the bills? When you spent my entire life treating me like an ATM while treating Michael like royalty? Is that what you call it? I could hear her sputtering on the other end of the line. That's not fair. I hung up the phone and blocked their numbers, cutting off the toxic cord that had been strangling me for years. That was 6 months ago. My grandparents keep me updated on the situation, discreetly sharing information when they can. Apparently, Michael and Sarah haven't paid a single month's rent. Mom and Dad are covering all the utilities, struggling to make ends meet. My brother still hasn't found a job, clinging to the fantasy of an executive position that will magically appear for a failed businessman with a track record of bankrupting businesses. My new life is peaceful and fulfilling. I got another promotion at work, bought myself a car, and started taking evening classes for my MBA. My apartment is always clean. My food stays in my fridge until I want to eat it, and I sleep in my own bed every night. The other day, I ran into Sarah's cousin at the grocery store. She told me they were expecting another baby. I just smiled and wished them well, knowing that somewhere across town, my parents are probably already figuring out how to pay for another nursery. But that's not my problem anymore. For the first time in my life, I'm putting myself first. So, Reddit, tell me, was I wrong to cut them off like that? Did I handle this situation correctly, or should I have tried to find another solution? I'm open to all opinions and perspectives, so please share your thoughts.